My name is Sherry Lee Evans. I'm an Australian and I'm a freelance curator working in the area of Antarctic heritage. Well, essentially, Terra Nova is Scott's chance to revisit unfinished business. The Discovery expedition, he doesn't reach the South Pole. So for him, it's very much unfinished business. He wants to get back there. Shackleton's gone down on the Nimrod. So it's equally for Scott about the science, but it is also about the race to the South Pole. So at this point, when the Terra Nova expedition goes south, there are a few theories floating around. Alfred Wegener still hasn't expounded his theory of continental drift, but there are a few scientists who've been looking at the maps, realising that it's like a giant jigsaw puzzle. They're also starting to understand that there are species of animals and fossils that seem to be found in very remote locations separate from one another now. But it's all leading towards a theory that at one time the continents were much closer together. How did Scott know what he was looking for? Well, there's a really interesting story behind this. Marie Stopes was a British scientist, and she desperately wanted to go south because she wanted to find the fossils that would prove the linkages between the continents, that they had once been much closer together. And she actually corners Scott at a fundraising dinner. He declines to take her. They didn't take women south in those days, but he's intrigued by what she says, to the extent that he actually visits her at the University of Manchester, and she shows him the fossil collection there and talks it through with him. It's really important to understand that at this time a lot of science concerns taking measurements and observations and collecting and describing specimens. And so the Terra Nova brings back to the UK over 2,000 different specimens of plants and animals, and over 400 of those are things that have never been described or seen before. And then within that there's a smaller collection that has a particular resonance. And they're actually found beside the bodies of Scott and the rest of the Polar Party. And we know that it was Wilson who actually argued with Scott and persuaded him that the rocks shouldn't be thrown out when they started to lighten the load on the sledges. But Wilson understands that they're very significant and could change the way that people viewed the world at that stage. And there's one fossil in particular. It's the first time that it's found in Antarctica is by the Terra Nova expedition. It's a beech tree, very much like Northophagus antarctica. It's a tree that indicates that at one stage Antarctica was warm and lush. Well, there's a big scientific legacy in all of the fossils and the observations and the specimens that the Terra Nova brings back with it. But above and beyond that, there are two more important legacies. One of those is the Scott Polar Research Institute itself. When people hear about the deaths of the Polar Party, there's a great outpouring of sympathy, and there's a collection is made to help the families of the men who haven't returned. There's money left over from that, and it's that money that sets up the Scott Polar Research Institute, which now is such a significant player in Antarctic research. And the other legacy is Robert Falcon Scott's son, Peter Scott. He goes on to become a well-known conservationist.